Our next question comes from our friend Noel Chief, who says, big question. Why are people so adamant on fighters weight cutting? What I mean is, for example, I told a guy I wanted to box at 126 pounds. I'm 5'3" tall. And he told me that's too high and I should go for around 115. I understand height and weight advantage, but I always see people saying so-and-so is too short for their weight class, despite the fact that several all-time greats were relatively short. Mike Tyson, Manny Pacquiao, Pernell Whitaker. And you didn't mention Jack Dempsey, my all-time favorite boxer. Way short for the heavyweight division and way light, too. What do you think about this? I know you're more of an MMA coach, but I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on this? Should all fighters cut below their natural weight? All right, Noel Chief. I got some thoughts about that, my friend. Weight cutting is a pernicious evil that has permeated combat sports for a very long time. When I started professional kickboxing, the organization that I fought for had day of weigh-ins. So the fighters would fight at their walking around weight, or very, very close to it. And I thought that was normal for the longest time. So I was not used to cutting weight. I just didn't. I walked around, how much did I walk around at? I walked around like 165 pounds, and I fought at 170. I fought as a welterweight, walking around at 165. Now, most people hearing that today would think, well, you should have cut to 155. Well, you got to remember, it's day of weigh-ins. And if you are cutting, 10 pounds of water weight on the day of your fight, that's no good, man. That's going to affect your performance. Now, any weight cut is going to affect your performance. Now, generally, fighters have at least a day, 24 hours between the weigh-ins and the fight to rehydrate and so on. And so if they cut about 10% or less of their body weight, that can be manageable. More than 10% of your body weight, that's asking for trouble. Now, especially if you're in the teeny tiny division, if you're like 125 cutting down to 115, man, that 10 pounds is a big deal. For a big guy, 10 pounds, not that big of a deal, but you know, when you're in the smaller weight divisions, 10 pounds is huge. Man. I'm going to tell you about some experiences I had weight cutting. The first time I actually cut weight, it was after I flew out here to Southeast Asia and started fighting here. And you can actually watch these fights here on YouTube. Let's see here. I had 3 fights in a week, in about a week and a half. The first one was in martial combat down in Singapore. And I got some misinformation about this fight from the guy who was setting up the fight. I'm just, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to call him my manager, even though he really wasn't. Anyway, so the guy tells me about this fight down in Singapore. He's like, oh yeah, it's going to be a catch weight at 165. I was walking around at 176 pounds, roughly. 176 pounds. So I was expecting a 10, 11 pound weight cut, which, you know, from 176 to 165, that's easy. That's easy to do, especially with time in advance to do it. I mean, that's sit in the sauna for 5-10 minutes, jog around a little bit, poop, spit in a bucket, you're fine. So I flew out to Singapore, expecting a catchweight fight at 165 pounds, expecting an easy cut in the sauna, sitting there, nice, relaxing, 5-10 minute sweat, and I'd be fine. I was expecting to fight just some guy, too. He told me, yeah, his record is similar to yours. And on paper, his MMA record was similar to mine, except this dude was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion at the time. Anyway, so I get down there and I find out right away, less than 24 hours before the weigh-ins, the promoter tells me, no, this is not a catchweight fight. I had been deceived, my friends. This manager of mine had given me some misinformation. So I was told I had to cut down to 145 pounds, from 176 all the way down to 145. They were asking me to cut about 18% of my body weight. And that is asking for trouble. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but I found out since that almost every fighter who has attempted a weight cut like that, even with advanced preparation, has died as a result. Almost every single one of them who have attempted that kind of weight cut has died. There was a guy last year down in Singapore who cut significantly less weight, less percentage of his body weight, and died of complications of dehydration. Man, if I had known that at the time. So what happens when you cut weight? Well, there are different ways to do it. There's a smart way to do it, and there's a stupid way to do it. Let's talk about the stupid way first, because that's what I did. Because it's going to affect your performance. Now, if you watch this martial combat fight, Ramsey Dewey versus Leandro Issa in martial combat, you're going to see some really awkward, sluggish movement. You're going to see some really, really slow movement, unnaturally slow. And I'll tell you why. I sweat off 31 pounds of body weight, over 30 pounds of body weight, going from 176 all the way down to 145 pounds. Now, when I got there in the hotel, the sauna was broken. So I put on every layer of clothing that I brought with me down to Singapore, which wasn't much. It was like some sweatpants and a sweatshirt and a couple of t-shirts and my gym shorts and my shoes and a couple pairs of socks. Put my hood on and I went to the hotel gym. They had a treadmill, an elliptical, and a stationary bike, and I jumped on there and I pedaled and ran and jogged and did the elliptical as much as I could, sweat as much as I could, and then did it all over again. And this went on for hours and hours and hours. It was like the equivalent of running several marathons. And man, just a few pounds into the weight cut, feeling like running a marathon, I'm thinking, man, I'm going to have nothing left for the fight tomorrow. But the weight cut continued. I got down, cut about 10 pounds of water weight. And when you're cutting water weight, you're sweating. When you're sweating, you're losing salt. You're losing electrolytes. Do you know what that is? I'll tell you if you don't know. Your body has electrical currents running through your nerves. Those electrical currents run on electrolytes, which are dissolved salts in fluids running through your nervous system that allows electrical impulses to travel from one ion, the negative ion, to the positive ion, positive to negative, and so on, in these chains throughout your body that allow you to do things like wiggle your fingers, move your arms and legs, blink, stay alive, have your heart keep beating, think, have cognitive processes, generally be alive and well. And if that electrical signal is broken, if that chain of ions is broken, what happens? Your muscles cramp up, they go numb, they don't respond correctly, and you can potentially die. So hours and hours and hours of jogging on the treadmill, running on the elliptical, going on the stationary bike till I felt like I was going to die, man. And I'd still only lost like 10, 12 pounds, and I had 18 to go, 18 pounds to go. Eventually, they finally fixed the sauna. And so I got in there in like 5-minute increments, and the weight came off very, very slowly. I blacked out a few times. Man, that was a scary thing, waking up in a sauna on the floor, having blacked out. And man, it is a miracle I'm still alive today. It's an absolute miracle I'm still alive today. And the crazy thing is, I did it twice that week. So, to make a long story short, I sweat and I sweat and I sweat. I sat in the sauna as long as I could. I went to the weight room, sat on that bike, and I pedaled as long as I could. I went back to the sauna, and this went on for hours and hours, and I was just feeling dead, nauseous, numb. My arms and legs wouldn't move. I could barely stand up. I couldn't stand up, really. That's why I resorted to sitting on the bike to do the pedaling. So I had lost this massive amount of water weight, of sweat out most of the salts in my body. I was running on empty. Depleted my glycogen stores almost completely. But I made weight. Man. That was the real fight right there. That was the real fight right there. And I weighed in, made weight, and everybody was like, all right, you want to rehydrate now? And man, I couldn't stomach anything. I just wanted to throw up. My stomach was churning. I went into that fight still almost 30 pounds dehydrated, barely able to stand. The room was spinning. I was dizzy. My arms and legs were numb. I remember throwing a kick, and the announcer, I remember him saying ponderous kicking from Ramsey Dewey, because my leg just wasn't working. And I remember thinking, man, I have to do something. So I put every last ounce of energy I had into a right hand and just flung it. It looked like garbage. Just this crazy looping overhand. Dude shot under and got a easy takedown and finished the fight with a Kimura. Taking nothing away from Landor Issa, he is an exceptional world-class fighter. But man, I really would have loved to have given him an actual fight. Now, 2 days later, I flew over to Xi'an, China, to fight a guy from the China top team, a guy named Amu Gulong. And Amu was a middleweight. He walked around at 185 pounds. And I had rehydrated a little bit, got somewhere up in the 160s range, and they paired us up to fight. So I'm fighting a little bit bigger guy, and that was a weird fight. Still not feeling 100%. Honestly, it took me several months to start feeling normal again after that weight cut. So man, that was a strange fight. We basically took turns beating each other up a little bit. This guy was a very good kickboxer, kicked my butt a little bit in the stand-up game. Caught one of my kicks, put me on the ground. I played guard a little bit. He punched me from my guard. I swept him, got on top because he had no ground game at all. And from the mount position, dropped elbows on him the rest of the round. And man, that was a screwy fight. I'll tell you more about that fight event later, but about 5 days later, I flew up to Inner Mongolia for a kickboxing match, which you can see some of it here on YouTube. My friend Jerry at Fight Commentary Breakdowns put some of that up on his channel, or you can go check it out on Chinese video sites. And that one I cut back down to 145. I had a few days' notice, so I did it more safely, safe-ish, if you will. But still, the weight cut took a dramatic effect. It made a dramatic change in the way I was able to move. So anyway, enough about me. The more weight you cut, the more it's going to affect your performance. So the smart reason to cut weight, if at all, is if you are close to the next weight class down. If you can cut a reasonable small amount of weight and still perform at your peak, that's ideal. So let's say you weigh 160 pounds and the next weight class down is 155, lightweight. Now, if you don't cut that 5 pounds, you'll have to fight welterweights, people cutting down, people who weigh more than 170, cutting down to the 170 weight class. So there's going to be a big weight disparity. So cut that 5 pounds, because that's easy to do. Okay? Now, some people might say, well, cut down to featherweight, cut down to 145. Now, cutting down from 160 to 145, a 15-pound weight cut at that weight, that's going to start affecting your performance. It's possible. You can do it, but it's going to affect your performance. It's going to start having negative repercussions. It's going to slow you down. It's going to sap you of energy. It's going to slow down your responses and your cognitive processes. And the more weight you cut, the more extreme that's going to be. So Noel Chief, let's see, you are 126 pounds, and they want you to cut down to 115. Man, that is a huge weight cut for a guy your size. I wouldn't recommend that personally. So why are people so adamant about that? I think they just have it in their mind that you want to be the big guy in your weight class. Now there's an advantage to being a big guy if you have energy. Yeah, if you're able to make that weight cut and feel good, cool. But if not, man, just go to the closest weight class. I like the example of Anderson Silva. He notoriously did not cut much weight to fight at 185 in the UFC. In fact, one fight he showed up with a double cheeseburger in hand, eating it at the weigh-ins as he stepped on the scale just to taunt his opponent, who he knew had been starving himself and dehydrating and cutting all this weight before the fight. And Anderson's there with that cheeseburger, eating it as he's weighing in, like, look at me. I'm full of energy and pep, and you, man, not so much. Look at what you had to do to yourself to get down to my weight. Man, that can play games with your mind. And it's definitely going to have an effect on the body. So, man, I would love to see all combat sports go back to day of weigh-ins. I would love the UFC to have day of weigh-ins. That would change everything. Man, that would skew the weight classes completely. And I would also love to see the UFC have a super heavyweight division with no upper weight limit. I mean, that would be fantastic in my opinion. But as is, athletic commissions have other ideas. Athletic commissions often have these ideas that are well-intentioned but ultimately harmful to fighters. For example, the addition of gloves to combat sports. People think gloves are these safety devices that make it safer. No, they allow you to punch more recklessly and do more damage. Yeah, they'll protect your hands from potentially breaking, but you know what else will? Good technique. Not recklessly punching. Picking and timing your shots carefully. And what else? The standing 8 count in boxing. That's a well-intentioned rule, and you can trace that back to Jack Dempsey when he fought Gene Tunney for the first time. Now, Jack and Gene were good friends. They were good friends. Till the day they died, they were friends. And before that fight, there was no standing 8 count in boxing. And Jack, out of respect to his good friend Gene, proposed the standing 8 count. He said, I will only do this fight if there is a standing 8 count. If the down fighter is under the care of the referee, and the standing fighter must return to a neutral corner, and the down fighter gets a standing 8 count before the fight continues. See, before that, the boxer who knocked the other guy down could just stand over him, and as soon as the down fighter put 2 feet on the floor, boom, you could knock him right down again. And Jack Dempsey won a lot of fights that way. He mauled people that way. And he didn't want to maul his friend, and obviously he knew Gene Tunney was an expert boxer. He didn't want to get mauled by Gene. So he proposed that rule because he thought, safety. So it's a well-intentioned rule, but ultimately, I think it's a dangerous one. And I'll tell you why, because that gives the potential for a concussed fighter to come back. In fact, I believe we saw this just recently with the Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fight. When Fury got knocked down and there was that long 10 count. Now, not a standing 8 count, was it? Man, got to go back. Anyway, there was this long count. Most people would agree it looked like Tyson got knocked out. If that was an MMA fight, the referee would have jumped in and waved it off immediately, because there are no standing 8 counts in MMA. There's no 10 count for a knockout. You're down. The referee makes a split decision. It's over. Your eyes roll back. You didn't get up under your own power. It's over. It's a KO. But not in boxing. In boxing, as we saw, Tyson Fury got up and, to his credit, was able to keep boxing at that expert level without skipping a beat. The downside of that is, what if he did skip a beat? And what if he got knocked out again? And again? I mean, man, it was like an inspirational Rocky-like comeback, but at the same time, if it wasn't, if he was rocked and loopy, if Deontay had his number on that day, man, Mr. Fury would have suffered some extreme brain damage and complications of multiple concussions. So that's why I do not like that aspect of boxing, because it is entirely possible for a concussed fighter to receive additional brain damage. And weirdly, even though MMA has the potential to be a more brutal sport, we see a lot more blood because of the little gloves and the elbows and the knees and the kicks and things like that, there's ultimately less brain damage for that specific reason, because, again, the referee makes a split decision when the fighter is down, and if the fighter is not able to get up immediately under their own power, it's over. And if they're not able to intelligently defend themselves, if the other guy jumps on them and keeps throwing a few strikes, it's over. So again, we don't see those multiple concussions, or the possibility for multiple concussions in MMA. But anyway, great question. So keep your weight cuts to a minimum, in my opinion. Cut as little weight as possible. And if in doubt, test it out a little bit at a time. But no more than 10% of your body weight. So again, if you're 125 pounds, man, you shouldn't be cutting any more than 12 pounds. And even that is a lot for a guy your size. So be very, very careful, because weight cutting can kill you. It does kill people. People have died from that. So approach with extreme caution, under the care of a professional, and make sure if you're sitting in a sauna, sweating to the point where you could black out, that you have somebody there to pull you out. Somebody watching your back at all times. Fighting, while it's a solo sport, if you will, it's not. It's a team sport. It's a team effort. Make sure you have your team behind you. Make sure you have people you trust with your life behind you. I can't stress that enough. People you trust with your life, because your literal life depends on this. Thank you for watching, my friend. Now get out there and train.